Hi, this is Christian Buckley. I'm back with another installment of the governance series, governance rules video or webinar series that I've been doing for the European SharePoint Conference community. My name is Christian Buckley with Exceller, and this session is called What Governance Looks Like in the Cloud. If you have not seen some of the previous webinars that I've done in the series, there are a couple slides here that are repeats, just to give everyone a balance of the topics, and then I'll jump into the unique content for this session. Some of the questions that I'll ask during the webinar. So what are the changes that are coming to SharePoint due to Microsoft's plans for the cloud? I know that I receive a lot of questions around this. A lot of businesses are interested in how the changes, how the move towards the cloud-first idea, will impact their business. So how will the cloud impact your business overall? Then what is the hybrid SharePoint environment? Does it make any sense for your business? And then finally, how does moving to the cloud impact your SharePoint planning and your ability to manage or govern SharePoint across the enterprise? And this is key as you think about starting to move towards the cloud model and taking advantage of some of the cost and resource efficiencies. How are you going to manage this? What does that look like? A little bit about me. Jump forward. So I am the Director of Product Evangelism at Exceller. I'm a SharePoint MVP. Prior to Exceller, I was with Microsoft. I was part of what was called the Microsoft Managed Services team, which became BPOS, which is now part of the Office 365 organization over on the dedicated side. So this was the team that was chartered with creating a hosted version of SharePoint. I was also over in advertising operations for a couple of years, helping run Ad Center. Prior to Microsoft, I was a consultant, so I was actually introduced to SharePoint back in 2005. I did a deployment for a customer. I'd actually seen SharePoint back in 2004. Honestly, wasn't very impressed with it. It wasn't until I started working with a customer and got a deeper insight into what the platform was capable of. And remember, this is back in the 2003 platform. But still got excited about it, wanted to get involved, and that's why I joined Microsoft. I'm also the co-author of Creating and Implementing Real-World Projects, which is available out on MS Press. And what this is for those that are in the 2010 space still, it's 10 end-to-end solutions. The idea here is that you learn better by doing. So if you have people in your organization that are trying to learn SharePoint, what better way than to have them go out and build some out-of-the-box, no-code solutions? The idea is that you start at the beginning of the chapter. By the end of the chapter, you have a working solution. So great way to learn. As I tell everyone, it makes a great stocking stuffer for the holiday season. Buy 10. All right, about Exceller. So Exceller's been around since the early 90s. We came from an extensive background in governance and collaboration in the Notes space. We were one of Lotus Notes' largest ISVs, and joined the SharePoint space in late 2007 with our award-winning Control Point product for administration and governance. We do governance, administration, and migration. So if you want to learn more about Exceller, go to exceller.com. All right, so some of the foundational slides here, definitions. Governance is not a checklist. It's not something that, we have a binder in the back. We did our governance 2 years ago. Why are we needing to talk about this again? Governance is an ongoing activity. It's about taking action, helping you to organize, optimize, and manage your systems and resources. And governance is not something that lives inside of SharePoint. Governance is something that is corporate-wide, and it is what guides how IT works, so that the IT systems and SharePoint systems within IT are able to meet those business needs. Governance strategy is never static. It's a living, breathing process. So it's something that you're going to learn by how your end users are using the platform based on the metrics that you need to track, to capture, or report on. You are going to constantly fine-tune your governance strategy. So So you need your strategy to be adaptable to meet the growing and changing needs of your business. And I've got some best practices at the end of it, kind of addressing the cloud pieces and then some of the general best practices around governance at the end. All right, so why are we talking about governance? SharePoint out of the box is a powerful platform. Many organizations don't think that they have the people or the time to think about governance. And I've heard this over and over again. Organizations that just stood up the servers and opened up the environment to all of their end users, and 6 months later, they find sites everywhere, process lawlessness. There's no consistency in templates and process in how people are using it. And so you have upset end users who have not adopted the platform. You basically have a very expensive file share platform. And it all comes down to not putting sufficient guidelines in place to govern how the platform is being used. So the same could be said for governance. Most organizations aren't thinking about it. The result is that the site sprawl, unfettered content, and the process lawlessness. So there's a great quote there's a new white paper out by Chris Beckett, who's a SharePoint certified master, called the white paper is called Governance and Administration for Hybrid Deployments, which says many organizations are experiencing a governance crisis. It's about how to manage their users and rapidly growing data across different platforms. Governance is about reducing risk and optimizing resource utilization. So it's increasingly important, especially as you're moving into cloud. You want to take advantage of all of these great new resources and drive down costs. But you need to make sure that you maintain control over that. Why we're also talking about cloud. In his keynote presentation at SP TechCon in February, the director of SharePoint at Microsoft, Jared Scutaro, announced that SharePoint 2013 was being developed using a cloud-first strategy. I'm going to come back to that point because it's important. Office 365 customers could expect to have access to the benefits of the new release sooner than on-premises deployments. I'll come back to that point. And also you had Kurt Delvini at Microsoft's Worldwide Partner Conference in Toronto, which I saw this live. So including SharePoint Online is growing at over 8 times faster than their predictions, and is likely to eclipse SharePoint as the fastest growing Microsoft offer ever. So Office 365 is growing very rapidly, and it's certainly driving how Microsoft is looking at the overall SharePoint space. And we'll talk about what that means. So why are we talking about the cloud? As SharePoint continues to expand its footprint, companies are looking for more flexible architectures to help them better meet their collaboration needs. Oh, and something didn't build correctly there. Hopefully that's not impacting other slides here. So some of the changes to SharePoint, what is coming out of this? I thought it would be good to talk about some of the things that are in the latest release, SharePoint 2013, just to give you a perspective of what's happening as Microsoft prepares for the cloud and makes this shift towards the cloud. So the first thing you saw with SharePoint 2013 was the predominant, the overwhelming feature set within this latest release is web content management. So where you have the focus of 2010 was predominantly about ECM, Enterprise Content Management. You have a lot of information rights management policies, and it was about the internal document management. But a lot of the biggest complaints about SharePoint 2010 was how difficult it was to use it as a web content management or external facing, whether extranet or public facing website platform. And companies were saying to Microsoft, we need one platform that can do it all. I want to be able to set my my containers for where I want content to be viewed into different audiences, but I want to publish one time to one place and have that content go to the right platforms. So you had some major advances around WCM in 2013. So it's built for those external websites. So a lot of the SEO capability, but it's built for the internet, built for mobile, and then also employs the use of, allows you to employ the use of non-Microsoft design tools. So you can now modify the look and feel, the branding of the site, and create device channels, meaning that you can design a look and feel for the iPad, for the Android phone, for your Windows devices, of course, but so that you can experience SharePoint in a customized way based on the devices that your employees or your partners or customers are using. So that was a huge shift. Also social. So we've heard so much buzz about the Yammer acquisition, but you think about it, if you've not yet seen SharePoint 2013, so much about it is about the social experiences within it. Everything's about sharing. Everything is personalized. Everything is about is adding that social context to your content, so that as you're interacting with content, that content, the search relevance improves because you're adding tags, you're adding content, you're adding conversations, you're liking it, you're linking to it, you're sharing it out, all of which is going to help surface that content. Building more robust metadata, making content more searchable, more findable, and better linking your teams. Then you have, of course, the Office, where you have expansion of the web-based Office apps. But you also have, and this is the more dramatic, is the consistency around the desktop and as well as the online experience. So the tools work very much the same way. Drag and drop is a great example of that. Just like you've been accustomed to doing that on your desktop, you can now, throughout all the tools, do the drag and drop. And so it's very powerful. It's important to have that consistent end-user experience. Search was improved, and so again, search is critical to the entire SharePoint experience. It's at it's the focal point of everything that we're doing. It's no longer are we querying, doing some archaic tool or creating a web part to go in there and pull content out. All of the presentation layer is now built around the search capabilities. Fast integration is no longer a separate server product. Fast is integrated within the platform. You have the hover panels. You have the ability to search by metadata, the improved analytics, all the things which improve the search experience, and it doesn't matter where your data is. And I'll come back to that point as well. But Microsoft is preparing for that. And then the last thing is what I mentioned earlier, the online-first strategy. And what this means is that with near parity between the on-prem and the online versions with 2013, what we're going to see is a shift in the way that Microsoft delivers software, that they're going to build with online in mind, which means for those of us that still have on-prem deployments or hybrid deployments, meaning you have both on-prem and online assets, we're going to see new features and capability delivered online first. And there may be features that are delivered for online that never make it to on-prem. So this is a major shift. So one of the chief complaints that people have now with some of the early versions of the online properties like Office 365 is how long it's taking to get some of the features that we've seen in the bits for the on-prem over into the cloud-based offerings. Well, we're going to see that role reversed. So it's going to help Microsoft deliver features quicker, but they're also looking at what's happening out there in the marketplace, that more and more people are experiencing the web through devices than they are through PCs. If you go out and look at any consumer reports, any of the mainstream news talking about high tech, is that PC sales are down, yet tablets and phone sales have increased dramatically. So more and more you're going to see people that need to access content through devices rather than through a PC. And so Microsoft is trying to prepare for that major shift. So change is coming to all of your enterprise applications. It's not just the Microsoft stack. You look at any other enterprise apps, they're building for this same vision of the future. So the idea is that there's data anytime, anywhere. Doesn't matter where the server is, whether it's under your desk, across town, on the other side of the planet. And it is great at the SharePoint conference in Las Vegas where they demonstrated some real-time Office 365 updates, and the servers were based, I believe it was based in Amsterdam, and it was sub-second delivery or sub-second performance on the tasks that were performed. So the data could be anywhere. Pick your tools, any tools. So you have the ability to go in and personalize how you're consuming data so that what's right for me and for my team, let's say I'm a project manager, and I'm running a project with a team that's global or geographically dispersed. I may go in and pull a set of reports and tools that are right for my team on my team site or on my site collection, which may be very different from what you or one of my peers selects for their team site, so their site collection. I need to have the ability to go in and not be dictated to how I consume my information, how I serve up my information, that I can work with my peers, with my directs, with my customers and partners to build out an experience that is right for my project, for my team, for my purposes. You also, as I mentioned, the bring your own device. So you need to be able to reach people on the devices that they are using. So you might have people in the field that are using tablets, that are using their cell phones, their smartphones, to access the data. You might, while there are some complexities behind supporting multiple platforms, many organizations are embracing this. They're saying, we want this thing to be entirely web-based so that it doesn't matter how people are accessing the content. They can access it through Android, through iOS, through Windows-based devices, and they can get to the same data and have a consistent experience across those tools, those platforms. And then you also have this introduction of social into everything. It's not a fad, folks. It is increasingly the way that we work through these social tools. And if you look at the rising generation, so the new entrants to the workforce, they are accustomed to communicating through these social platforms. And so you are going to see more and more enrichment of enterprise applications with social capabilities. It's becoming more and more just the way that we communicate and share information. And as I mentioned earlier with the changes to SharePoint 2013, it is a way of adding to and providing context to the content within our enterprise applications like SharePoint. And then the last thing is that solutions are increasingly being built for the business user, not the IT organization. So you may have applications which are purchased, so a service purchased by the business that IT is never even aware of. And so increasingly these business applications that are cloud-based will be able to plug into enterprise data, production data elsewhere, where the role of IT changes dramatically. IT may be getting more into a compliance and an auditing, a monitoring, reporting role, and less into managing the specifics of and supporting each of these individual applications, these different technologies. So I don't think the role of IT goes away, it just changes. And it turns inward, focused more on the needs of the business. And that's really one of the main benefits of the cloud-based model in moving these tools and capabilities outside of the corporation, is that you can then go and buy these tools. You have automatically, and I'm jumping ahead to some of the benefits of cloud, but you have a way of redirecting those resources back to your business needs and looking at how can we now that we're not worrying about standing up servers, focus more on just driving the business and doing more business. All right, evolution of the cloud. So just as a background here, the nature of how we collaborate has evolved. And for those that, my career is 22 years now. So looking back and some of the old systems that I interacted with, back in the early 90s, I was working for Electronic Data Systems, or EDS, which used to be run by Ross Perot. If you know that name, he ran for president of the U.S. a few years back. But we would do a lot of these old transactional systems, very expensive, that were all using value-added networks, or VANs, and EDI, the electronic data interchange. You had then, with the expansion of the web in the early to mid-90s, of the e-commerce platforms, you also saw huge steps forward in telecom. I remember, if you remember, what is it, NetMeeting, the precursor to Microsoft's current slate of tools, and Link, back on the XP platform. I remember doing, when the instant messaging protocols came out, I was part of the beta testing program for AOL's Instant Messenger. I had a buddy who worked at AOL, and so got to participate in the early to mid 90s. But with the early versions of the Yahoo Messenger, being able to go and use the voice over IP solutions for testing, how did we ever test software before we had the web meetings and instant messaging? It just amazes me to think back to the old days of just using conference lines where we had geographically dispersed folks QA, different releases of software before going live. You had the introduction about 12 or so years ago of SOAP and XML, which is really what started to give us this lightweight, web-based, protocols for sharing information in real time. You then had the service-oriented architecture and web services, which allowed us to go and build functionality in a service bus model, so that I can go and connect one time, and then I could reach disparate systems and capabilities through this service bus model and through the service-oriented architecture, that you could go and build and add functionality without having to re-release the entire product. We had this platform that you could plug into and reach richer functionality. You have all of that is sped up with the virtualization technologies that are out there and the inexpensive hardware that's out there, all of which have brought us to where we are today, and able to offer things like the SharePoint platform. Well, SharePoint the footprint is large, it's very powerful, it's a very rich platform. It's what's enabled Microsoft to start building out this cloud vision. All of these things leading towards where we are today. We could not have accomplished, clearly, where we are today even 5, 6 years ago. We are where we are. The maturity of the platform and the technologies have brought us to this point. So, again, 10 years ago, the expansion of SOAP and XML that allowed that real-time analytics. From enterprises to service providers, companies are trying to figure out their path forward in the cloud. And again, making that comment, it's not a fad, it's the evolution of software and collaboration, and it's where businesses are going. Businesses want to focus on their business. They don't want to have to become experts in every platform, every tool, every software out there. Let the experts be the experts. Let us just purchase a system and access that system on demand. That's the idea of the cloud. So some alternatives for control, cost, and capability. Of course, you've heard about these. You have the infrastructure as a service, so the ability to go in and get the hardware and all the components that you need on demand. You have the platform as a service. I think of SharePoint Online as that platform as a service. You have vendors that are out there like Tunix, Rackspace, FPWeb, and others that give you an open door into full control SharePoint on hardware that they maintain. You don't have to worry about the hardware, but get in there and do whatever you need to do and customize SharePoint. And then you have the next version of it, which is software as a service, which is more of the Office 365. You're not having to install SharePoint online. It's there. It's packaged in a way that's optimized. There are SLAs or service level agreements in place. That's the difference between those. Infrastructure as a service that you may pick and choose the components that go into the solution that's being hosted on your behalf. Platform as a service where the hardware is essentially taken care of, but that you have full control over the software and how you're customizing that. And then software as a service where it's much more packaged. So there are different options based on what your needs are. And you need to understand the differences between these depending on what you're trying to accomplish. I hear this a lot from people that are trying to make the jump from an on-premises version of SharePoint over to Office 365, and they're frustrated by not having some of the level of control and customizations that they had. So you need to make that decision. What is right for your business? There are plenty of options that are out there. There's plenty of help that you can get for each of the options. But you need to make decisions based on what is right for your business, not necessarily what is going to reduce your short-term costs, because there could be long-term cost implications to removing customizations and functionality by moving to a software as a service model. So you just need to understand those things. So going back to that online first, so you have the VMs that provide the ability to host at stateful Windows or Linux-based virtual machines, websites providing the ability to support websites written in a variety of languages, and then the mobile services that are increasing. This is why Microsoft is putting so much effort behind delivering online first, because that is the shift in where companies are moving. So some of the advantages to SharePoint in the cloud. So you think of some of the common solutions. Of course, you have the extranet solutions, and then you have the public-facing websites in SharePoint. Now, of course, these are some of what, from a 2010 experience, what organizations were doing. You also have the ability just to move your environment entirely to the cloud. People forget. They tend to jump from, when they think about cloud and SharePoint, they think Office 365. There's a very big medium step there. That is the dedicated hosted solution. There are plenty of providers. The ones that I named, Tunix, Rackspace, and FPWeb, for example. Over in the dev and testing realm, you also have CloudShare. There are 4 companies that can give you full access to everything that you want to do within SharePoint in a hosted environment, so you don't have to maintain the hardware. It's more of a platform as a service. Now, depending on the service level and what your business needs, you can get very close with those environments to 3 of the 4. CloudShare is just dev and development and testing. But with the other 3, get very close to a software as a service model, depending on what your requirements are. For most common, people are building out an extranet, or they're building out a public-facing website, and that's how they're introducing themselves, their businesses, into the cloud. Now, some other common scenarios, and this comes from a Microsoft document called Hybrid SharePoint Environments with Office 365. And think about this from an Office 365 as well as a SharePoint Online, so a dedicated hosted solution. But these are common scenarios. So you have that rapid provisioning of new workloads on Office 365 while maintaining existing on-prem. So this is that extranet solution. You need to collaborate with somebody outside of your organization. Instead of going through all the security issues and the risks that are inherent with giving people access to behind the firewall just so they can collaborate with your team, you can spin up an Office 365 environment so you can keep your on-prem as your primary and then work with Office 365. Organizations that want to migrate workloads from on-prem to the cloud over time in a phased approach. So maybe you are satisfied with the software as a service, with the functionality that's available through Office 365, and you slowly want to migrate those workloads, those activities, over to Office 365. And it's just going to take you time. What do you do in the interim to manage between those two? Organizations wanting to supplement their cloud environment with additional features or customization. So that maybe you want to move the majority of your collaboration activity to Office 365, but there are customizations, maybe from your product development or engineering teams, that simply cannot be done in that software as a service model. It breaks that model. Therefore, you want to remain in an on-prem instance for those teams. Again, what are you measuring? What are you maintaining? How are you governing the activities between those two systems to know who is doing what data is being shared in between those? And then compliance or data sovereignty reasons, which might stipulate that some data cannot be out in the cloud. It has to be on-prem. So know what industry or what regulations that apply to your situation, to know what are the legal restrictions with me placing this data, this intellectual property, out into the cloud. So some of the advantages, of course, to a cloud-based solution, you have that professionally managed data center. You've got the 24/7 support and advanced network security and intrusion detection that come with most of it. That's why it's important to go and understand what you're buying, to make sure you know what's in your SLA, but the separation of identity and content. So, not having to deal with those two, that you know that this content here is for the on-prem, it's for internal-facing only. The content that's going to be out in the cloud, there will be interaction with people that are at a lower security level. The rapid provisioning of environments. So you don't have to go and procure hardware and do the installation, and do the hardening of the system, and then add users and build it out. Very quickly, through the cloud-based resources, you can be online. Literally within minutes. You can go in, swipe a credit card, be online, inviting people in to collaborate. And then as well, the on-demand scale-out capability of these cloud-based systems. So if you have 10 people on it, but say, okay, we're about to launch an event, we're going to have 5,000 people accessing this, and you can build up to prepare for the needs at scale, and then when you're done with that high level of activity, reduce back down. So you're only paying for what you're using at that time. So some of the flexibility of using a cloud-based model. So what does governance look like in a hybrid world? So again, you have some activity out in the cloud. You have some that are on-prem. What does governance look like there? So you need to take a strategic view of what your SharePoint environment looks like. Understand the requirements around identity management. Who has access to what within the system? You need to think about supporting your growing service catalog. So what are the services that we're providing in each of those places? And as new requirements come in, as different workloads are being requested, you need to make the decision, is this better, more cost-effective, reaching the right audiences in the cloud, or do we need to do this on-prem? And then that allows you to have a more granular service management model. So you're better going to be able to manage the activity if you have a plan for these workloads are on-prem, these workloads are in the cloud. Here is the data that needs to be shared in between them. Here are the roles and responsibilities for each of these things. And here are the metrics, the reporting, the compliance, and the auditing capability for each of these environments. Have that mapped out. Don't just jump with both feet into the deep end of the pool, but again, do what is logical based on business needs and what is available out in the cloud. And another slide, I'll mention the fact that not every workload out there can yet be fully supported, robustly supported in the cloud. So just something to think about. Now, I always like to reference people to kind of a holistic way of looking at governance. My favorite model is out there because it's just clean and simple and effective, is by 21 Apps. A good friend, Andrew Woodward, who has on his site these 5 pillars of governance. As you think about each of these areas as you're starting to build out your strategy, the technology assurance, the overall project governance, and your information governance. So think about your information architecture and how that's being managed in between this. So, what are the work streams? What are the, how are we managing the projects? How are we managing the information? The business to technology alignment. So are we doing the right things that are meeting our business requirements? It's not just about having the latest, greatest technology out there, but actually meeting business needs. And then what is our process for continuous improvement? So critical to having strong governance policies is having a transparent continuous improvement process, that change management process. Constantly go back and look, and are we doing the right things? Could we do things better? All right, refining those plans, I just wanted to point out, I think I've got 7 or 8 here, of how you can, the things that you can consider, a little more granular. You've looked at the 5 pillars, you're looking at your governance strategy holistically. What are some other key considerations as you think about governance in the cloud? First is how you're managing permissions. So document this. Think about that, like if I'm removing somebody from somebody who's left the company, what methods do you have, what reporting tools do you have to go in and look at who has access to what, where are they doing, do I need to reassign them, do I need to delete content in sites, what do I need to do? So think about what the permission scenarios are within your organization. And the more that you can simplify this, whether it's through Active Directory groups, SharePoint groups, is to consolidate those and to link those AD and SharePoint groups together so that, and you have that well documented within, I would recommend that you have a governance site where this is all documented. But you need to run through those scenarios of what this looks like in your hybrid environment. What is the visibility into your information architecture, how your managed metadata is being utilized across all environments? Again, there's a disconnect because you may not have the ability to move terms to stores and manage metadata in between these environments, so you may have to go in and duplicate. So as you're making changes or updates to your managed metadata, how is that being replicated across all of your different environments? Something to think about. The tracking of storage. What's being used? Do you see sites and content proliferating on-prem and hardly any growth out online, or maybe vice versa? So again, the rules that you put in place, how you govern these, how standardized is it across these environments, how are you monitoring, reporting on how these things are being used, and ensuring that there's enough capacity for the work streams that you have defined for on-prem or online. Thinking about your auditing and compliance monitoring. Again, what are the reports? What are the activities that are happening? What are you able to make actionable? So it's not just about getting activity reports say, okay, here's how many documents were uploaded. Good information. I want to know who's doing what, where are they doing that, is the best place for that. If I'm seeing increasing activity by one team over in certain team sites where everyone else is doing the opposite, they're out using the Office 365 environment. Why is that? That's where this old-fashioned thing called conversation comes into play. Go and have a dialogue with that team. Understand how they're using it and whether the online, where you're trying to slowly migrate people to, may not be meeting the needs of that organization. You may need to go in and think about the special needs of each of those organizations. You can learn so much through auditing and compliance monitoring. It's not this negative. There may be rules that you are held to, your company, your industry, that you need to make sure that documentation is there, a certain level of transparency, so that only the right people are accessing the right content and at the right times. Yes, but you can also learn from this data to improve the productivity of people within the platform and increase overall adoption of the platform by monitoring how people are using the platform and making changes based on what you learn. Of course, reporting, understand what is possible through on-prem versus through the cloud. If you're using Office 365, there are canned reports. There's some customization you can make to this, but you're going to get much more robust capability through the on-prem. However, there are a number of vendors that are out there. WebTrends is a great example that is trying to provide data across both of those. So definitely look into the partner ecosystem, specifically at solutions and tools that can bridge the gap, that can offer you a single view into data across both the online and on-prem. And it's something that my company, Exceller, is also working on from a governance and administration standpoint. So that is going to be increasingly important for organizations that are going to be managing hybrid environments to look at vendor solutions that can span both environment types. Social monitoring is also increasingly important. There is minimal reporting that's available out of SharePoint. It's part of this, the canned or the standardized reporting. So again, as your organization gets more social, think first about the data that you would like to capture. Don't go and build your requirements based on what you believe or what you understand to be available. Think about, this is what we really need, and then build that requirement set. That gives you a basis from which then to go and look at partner solutions as they come online, or even to work with Microsoft to help them develop more robust reporting and solutions so that you can have more control and security around the social interactions happening inside SharePoint in a hybrid environment. I also have listed here migration planning. As you're moving content, if you're slowly moving over to the cloud, or if you're moving content in between environments, you need to think about what the impacts are of moving that content. Access and permissions, the content impacts, looking at most and least active sites, the inactive users, the user migration, where they have access to, all of those things, and then constantly be cleaning up. Be very careful as you are moving in between on-prem and online versions that you're not duplicating. Where is the source? Clean up behind you as you are moving across from one environment to the other. Otherwise, it could cause some confusion and potentially some security risk by having old versions of content, or have people who should not have access to content with access to that sensitive information. And finally, the ability to set management policies and procedures that span the systems. So it comes back to understanding what is possible in each of your environments, and then how can I have visibility. It may initially be very manual to provide the level of visibility and control that you need over both your on-prem and your online environments. Just be ready for that, because Microsoft does not yet provide capability to allow you to manage the governance and administration across those multiple or hybrid environments. You have to go into the partner ecosystem, and even so, Exceller offers some. There's some other vendors that are out there that are offering some solutions, but what is available online is not yet as robust as what's available on-prem, and then very few vendors yet provide capability across both. So it's something to think about so that you are, as you're moving to the cloud, your expectations are set for the rich functionality that you're accustomed to in on-prem. It's not yet all there for the cloud. And that could affect your decision how fast you move towards the cloud. So just be aware of that. Do your homework. All right, so the evolution of the cloud, this was a great article in the latest edition of Channel Pro magazine. This article called The Decision Tree for Moving to the Cloud. It was really positioned more at service providers and guidance on moving to the cloud. But whether you're building for customers or employees, there's some great guidance, things to think about. So what cloud services should you pursue? You really need to start by looking at the tools and systems that you're using today and figure out where you're going to save money and save time by moving to the cloud. Don't just say we're going to move everything over, because as I mentioned earlier, not everything yet is as robust. There's not complete parity in every workload out there. Hosted Exchange is a great example of something that is very robust. It's mature in a hosted platform. So focus first on moving to mature solutions so you minimize that risk of moving over. Then, jumping to the other end of the spectrum, investigate new capabilities that are not already in-house. So things that you don't already offer today but are being offered in the cloud. So meaning that as you want to add some new tools, some new capabilities that the team is clamoring for, great. If you can offer the cloud-based version, even though it may not be as robust as what might be with an on-prem deployment, it's an opportunity for you to slowly be moving the mindset to the cloud and taking advantage of all those benefits. Should I consider cloud only or a combination of cloud and on-premises solutions? And it really depends on what your business requirements are. A lot of organizations have spent a lot of time building extensive customizations in their on-prem deployments of SharePoint, and you just can't do what these systems do in the cloud. So think about that from a hybrid standpoint. What are the workloads? That's why I go back to the public-facing websites and extranets being the most popular, most common cloud-based solutions today as companies are thinking about beginning to plan out for a move to the cloud. So do what makes sense for your business, not just because you think you could save some money by reducing IT costs, because the long-term costs of the reduced functionality, the reduced productivity, could cost you much more than the savings you garnered by jumping to the cloud early. What kind of cloud partner should you choose? This should follow basically any other vendor selection process where you're looking at what they're offering, who they support, and how long they've been in business. Common things, just like any other RFP that's out there, do your homework on what these cloud service vendors are providing. Depending on what you plan to move to the cloud, which work streams, you'll look for partners with the strongest SLAs, and also highly recommend that you look for specialization. For example, I bring up the example of a hosted project portfolio management provider, PPM. Go with one that has a strong history in project management, not just somebody who has stood up servers and is running an instance of Project Server. That's the benefit. Another benefit of the cloud model is going to the experts for those pieces that you need. And then, how do cloud services differ from traditional managed services? The two main differences here is that you're not doing a major upgrade every 3 to 4 years, but it's more of an iterative update. And then also, you just need to understand, of course, the revenue model for those service providers is very different from that project-based model moving to that recurring revenue model. So it comes into play. It may be very low cost to get involved, but as you add that up over year over year and look at the support and look at the reduced capability, potentially reduced functionality of cloud-based solution, and you need to, again, make a balanced decision on whether it makes sense to move to the cloud versus stay on-prem. So some of the best practices, make governance a priority, especially if you are looking to make a major thrust into the hybrid or cloud-based world. You need to look at your systems holistically. Look at it from a business perspective, not just at the short-sighted from an IT cost-saving perspective. It doesn't matter where the servers sit. Think first about what is the solution I need to have in place. Clarify and document things like your permissions, your information architecture, your templates, content types, taxonomy, all those things. Who owns them? And in a hybrid model, who is responsibility for maintaining them and making sure they're consistent? Then you need to also define what policies, procedures, and metrics are needed to manage your environment. Then look at what's possible across the cloud. So again, focus first on what's needed for the business, then look at what's possible out in the cloud. And based on what your business requirements are, you may find that it's not yet ready, it's not yet time to move to the cloud, or that it makes no sense for you to delay, move immediately to the cloud. So just do it for the right reasons, for the business reasons. With any IT change, planning is key. Always utilize your established project management methodology. If you're going to introduce change into your organization and get your end users involved, they will get very concerned and start thrashing about if it's not visible, if they don't understand what is happening around them. So I always recommend follow these simple, universal guidelines for planning. Number one, understand your business objectives. Two, understand your end user expectations to those business objectives. Then understand your governance model, your change management model. Take that feedback and constantly iterate. Show people that you're listening, that you're taking their feedback, and that it's built into your plan. Or if you're not taking action on that, tell them why. It's a low priority, or it's just a flat-out dumb idea. I have no problem with telling end users that either. And then make your efforts transparent, because the more that people are able to participate in the process, the more likely they are to support that process. So thank you for participating. If you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Again, I highly recommend that you take a look at this white paper, Governance Administration for Hybrid Deployments, written by Chris Beckett. You can find it at the URL there. I'll also be making these slides available out to the rest of the European SharePoint community, as well as posting them out on my profile on SlideShare. Thank you very much for participating.